guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy Hudak, and I am Stan's guest today on this Friday episode. Just a lot of things in flux in what would normally be a little bit of downtime here in the college football season. But Tulane is just kind of in the midst of experiencing what happens when turnover starts to take place. And we've seen it now really shape out a little more since the last couple of episodes. In my episode last week on Tuesday. Yeah, at that point was Willie Fritz's departure was fresh as of those last couple of days. And my following episode this last Tuesday was when Tulane had hired new head coach Jon Sumrall. So in the middle of that time, nothing on its face really was going on for Tulane. They have started kind of conditioning for bowl practices, and those are going to start taking place next week. And once I'm able to kind of see those and get a sense of who's healthy, how coaching is going to shape out with a lot of the turnover that we have seen this week, which is something I'm going to talk about. Then I'll be able to kind of, I think, delve a little more into bowl previews and those kind of things. But I know that a lot of things have gone on these last couple of days. The fact that it seems like Jon Sumrall's press conference was already 2 weeks ago just speaks to the amount of things that have been going on for Tulane. Again, normally this time of year, it's a good thing to be relevant. And despite losing an all-time great head coach in Willie Fritz, Tulane has handled the fallout, honestly, just impeccably. The decision to hire Jon Sumrall, the quickness and due diligence and really kind of pursuing him as that top option and doing so in a timely manner, having him here and really hitting the ground running following that press conference. That's all that Tulane could do in this situation. And after that, it's how you have this new captain in charge, seeing how he kind of moves. And that's what I'm going to kind of talk about in today's episode. Just a lot of the coaching turnover that we've seen, what that really says about the leadership and the direction that Tulane is going into, and then just diving a little bit more into, in line with, I think, the theme and idea of this show of looking kind of at coaching philosophies and mentors and seeing how coaching trees shape out, how principles shake down, and kind of end this just focusing on Tulane's new head coach and what his mentors kind of looked like and how their philosophies are something I can already see trickling down just based in the comments of Jon Sumrall at that introductory press conference, his actions over these last couple of weeks, both at Troy and Tulane, what he said and stood behind with his actions as well. So when I was kind of coming up for what to do for this show, where again, so much has happened, but not really that much at the same time, at least from a football perspective, the coach that I did forget to mention, or I guess, yes, strength and conditioning coach. Unfortunately, Tulane did lose Kurt Hester, who went over to the Houston Cougars as well. That's just a huge loss for me as someone that really enjoyed Kurt Hester as a person and a human being and what he did for that football program. A lot of those guys that talk about that brotherhood and those feelings after that 2-10 year that turned them into conference champions started a lot in that offseason with Kurt Hester when he worked with those guys. And so I just feel like the impact on him and how these guys are feeling right now can't be understated. And it's just, again, it's another emotional loss for someone that really instilled that sense of brotherhood here at Tulane. But as you know, my parents put it very bluntly growing up, just life is unfair. Things happen. You could walk outside and get hit by a bus tomorrow. And that's just how life is. How do you move forward and how do you respond to it? One of the things, again, that I've seen been circulating about Jon Sumrall is one of the comments about him saying the only disability in life is a bad attitude. I just think back to Steve Gleason as the paramount example of what he's trying to say there. And just, again, when you're looking for what traits kind of matter in a head coach, it's just all of these things that he said really stuck out to me. But really the most important thing for me, and I think in fairness with this discourse of what's been going on with fans and feeling, like the coach that they knew isn't the coach that they're seeing kind of acting out over in Houston is consistency to me. Just as much as we talk about that idea of sustaining success and having that consistency within the program, I think it just is, that starts at the top. And so consistency is something that's super important for me when I'm, evaluating in my really important life of looking at a new head coach. And so when I was looking up for this article, and like I said, I was looking up for this episode, kind of curious about the mentorship tree of Jon Sumrall. I found one of these articles that talked about his comments back at Sunbelt Media Day back in, let me get the date correct here, in 2022. So this was his first year as that head coach. And I'm just going to read the quote out word for word instead of paraphrase. He said, sometimes when you walk into a new environment, a lot of people say, wait till this coach gets his guys or wait till they get their recruiting class. I got news for you. These are my guys. These are my guys right here. The guys on our team and in our locker room, there are guys whether I recruited them or not. That is pretty much exactly the sentiments in which he expressed towards this Tulane football program, and all of the exact kind of comments about, well, who he's bringing over. He's just focused on being the head coach at Tulane right now, and has made it clear that his coaches, would-be coaches, whoever at Troy, they are focused on the Birmingham Bowl on December 23rd. Again, just seeing how Jon Sumrall has handled this whole situation at Troy, I think can make fans just feel better and feel like he is a coach that really is standing behind what he says, and his actions do line up with his words year after year, and coaching destination after coaching destination. And that's where he really mentioned his mentors, and that the way he really learned from them is coming from a players first model. Because the idea is if there were no players, there wouldn't be any football coaches. And just the way he describes coaching, where, he does point out that, how amazing is it that we get to do this for a living? It's a game that he just truly loves for the sake of love of the game itself. Told us when he was about 12 or 13, he knew he wanted to go into coaching. Said he got his bachelor's in finance from Kentucky, but really went there for his master's in coaching. And so knowing that someone really has that strong desire to be a coach, but to do it the right way and to look at the players first before anything else. That to me has really been the culture of Tulane these last couple of seasons, has been a player-driven team, one of true leadership and true brotherhood. And just to hear some of these players at Troy say that they had already felt this kind of shift within their locker room, and that it was being internal leadership that was really driving the bus, that really lines up with what you've seen Tulane be really successful as under Willie Fritz. And again, this idea of how do you sustain a legacy with a changing of the hand, and having someone come in and build their own culture while a successful one already exists there. It's interesting. It's certainly a lot better than having to come into a losing culture and figure out what went wrong there. And he said that before as well, where his time at Tulane and just his time in coaching, learning what not to do and seeing things go wrong is just as important as learning how to sustain that success and learning how to make players tick. That was something else that he had said in his introductory press conference that really stuck with me, because at the end of the day, I am a huge proponent of this one, where you could teach a player a scheme, you could teach them what to do. If their head's not in the game for one reason or another, it just does not matter how physically gifted they are, how skilled they are at understanding playbooks, at reading defensive coverage. It just doesn't matter if there's something going on in their life or they're not being taught in a way that is resonating with them. And so I just feel like that's something to always be aware of. And another comment that he said was the idea of it not being a transactional relationship between the athletes, but a transformational one at that. The other one being that he is willing to sacrifice things in the short term for the long-term goal. And in discussing that, in reference to not pursuing players from Troy in the transfer portal right now, or poaching those coaches to come over to Tulane, where he admitted that it might be something that hurts him in the short term, but he wants to do things the right way, and that believes that that's the best way to set things up in the long term for that success. So those two comments really resonated with me, that transformational idea and the idea of long-term success and vision. And so, like I said, when I went and found out who his mentors were and then went and tracked down these coaching clinics, one of the ones that Mark Stoops had done was this idea of climate versus culture. And I think that those comments by Jon Sumrall, you can really see take place in the comments that he was saying. And there were 7 principles there. And as much as we're discussing about, principles that have or have not been followed within the Tulane community, it might be a nice palate refresher that, again, while these aren't Jon Sumrall's exact principles, this was his mentor in Mark Stoops, and something you can see a lot of trickle down effect from, and feel like you were really in good hands here at Tulane. So the first one on that list is climate is shallow and erratic, whereas culture is something that is deep and enduring. As I said, it's a very interesting situation where he doesn't have to walk in and build Rome in a day, in the sense that Tulane is a successful program right now as it stands, but there are a lot of coaches that have to be filled. There are players that have entered the transfer portal. There are players that are going to be going on to the draft and graduating, and he has to fill all of those holes, all the while being the one to really continue Tulane into this expanded college playoffs and to continue contending for conference championships while still creating really his own space here. And so that is just kind of that easy one. And it goes back to his comments of short-term vision versus long-term success. I mean, that is this idea of climate versus culture in a nutshell, where, yeah, in the short term, you could do whatever you want. If nothing else, that's been made clear in these weeks of college football, what have you. But doing things the right way long term is the more difficult one, but it's the one that's going to endure. And I think, again, really resonate with players, with staff, with a community. The next one is climate measures the organizational temperature, whereas culture regulates the organizational temperature. I guess that's more of a sense of reactivity versus proactivity, but you just look again, and if you want to take a measure of the organizational temperature of Tulane and what the climate was that Jon Sumrall came into, well, it was a little bit of a mess. So how did he regulate that? He cleaned house where he needed to do so and retained coaches where he felt that they should still be on the staff here. And again, did that all within a day, and all but regulated all of these things going on here by eliminating all of the possibility of those things still continuing within Tulane's building. So you really, again, knock those two things out of the park just to start off. Climate is dependent on present circumstances, whereas culture will withstand present circumstances. That's the one where I put in my notes that idea of long-term vision versus short-term vision, where, again, the climate at Tulane over the last couple of weeks has been a little bit of a hot button issue. Doing things the right way, doing things the way that Jon Sumrall feels that he's learned from his mentors and that he's done at Troy and is going to want to do over here at Tulane. That's the idea of short versus long-term vision. And that is the definition of culture and a legacy. Again, anyone can come in and scheme up a playbook and catch a few teams off guard and go to levels of success that you've never seen before. The question is always really backing that up. And so that's where culture has to withstand things that go on, situations of adversity. We've seen Tulane handle adversity in a ton of ways, from a hurricane to this coaching change to everything that's gone on as we've changed over the tide here. But for everyone, again, to just feel this confident in the leadership there at Tulane already shows that there's a culture being built here under Jon Sumrall. Positive culture follows success, whereas a positive culture withstands success. That one's super interesting to me. That's really, I think, what you saw Tulane do this last year, but weren't able to, ultimately reach the highest mountaintop and repeating at the New Year's Six. But will they be able to still keep their heads in the game and perform and win this bowl game despite everything that's going on? That is really a true test of culture. And with success comes a lot of this mess. I don't know when this coaching clinic was made, or if that was pre or post transfer portal, or if that had anything to do, with this kind of conversation. But I think the idea of withstanding success isn't just building on paper and going back to conference championships and going undefeated in conference play. It's dealing with the unavoidable things that happen with success, where this happens at Power 5 programs. This happens at other G5 programs. We poached a really good coach from another really good G5 program. That's what happens when you are successful. Coaches leave, players follow, players stay. But if you're able to withstand all of that crap and mess, that's when you have something going here. And I think that we're already seeing that really be built. Climate change is easier and can come quickly. Culture change is hard and takes longer than we would desire. Again, short-term versus long-term vision. Yes, he might be able to retain some of these guys in the transfer portal if he was able to identify who their coaching staff would be next year. But he's more concerned with doing things the correct way. And I think what you've seen just in the character of Tulane guys over these last couple of seasons, in leaders that are still here and stepping up, even though Willie Fritz has departed, even though they weren't around guys like Nick Anderson, someone again like Tyler Grubbs, sticking around and knowing that what Tulane's building here is really special, and just having such high character, high quality guys around the program. That's something that resonates with those type of guys. And so when you talk about doing things the right way, that comes into how recruits look at your program, how transfer portal guys look at your program. And what you can see at Tulane is a place where there's just a massive level of respect and due diligence towards doing things the way that they feel is within their morals and their principles, and how that translates to what the players are going to see out of their leaders at the top. There's two more here, and I feel like I'm sort of, getting in the weeds here, but climate is a team's reaction to present events and circumstances. Culture enables a team to respond to unforeseen events and persevere difficult circumstances. This whole last week in a nutshell, climate leaders are reactionary by nature and prone to choose the quick fix based on short-term results, whereas culture leaders are intentional by nature and are willing to choose the difficult road that leads to lasting impact. I guess I could have just really given that one and shown how that related to Jon Sumrall, but again, it wasn't just the long-term versus short-term comment that he made, even though that does really resonate with that one. It's choosing instead to just say how he would do things and not really taking any type of shots at previous people and people that, matter to him. Again, this is a business of human beings. And as much as things might sting from a football level, at the end of the day, it still just is a football game. And I think, again, you have a coach that understands that, but also understands what he can do for young men and develop their character and develop them for life. That's really what all of my takeaway from Jon Sumrall's comments were at the press conference, and just, again, everything that we've heard around, and then looking at what he's done in this last week where, yeah, we don't know who the defensive coordinator for Tulane is at this point. We don't know who the linebackers coach is. We don't know who the wide receivers coach is for Tulane. We can surmise that some guys might be brought over from Troy, but Jon Sumrall is making a point to not even have those conversations yet, to where, I've seen things say, well, he could have still been doing these same kind of things over at Troy. If he is, he's doing a hell of a job at keeping it under wraps. But I do really, again, when you look at an article like I just read of saying that these guys here, his first job is recruiting these guys. And just because he comes into a new place, he recognizes that this team, this is theirs. And he is just leading these guys at the top of that. It's the same comments that we saw from this introductory press conference. And you can just see the overwhelming reaction by Troy fans of how important and how good of a coach Jon Sumrall was, and that we're, going to be in good hands here over at Tulane. And without really doing that much at all on the field, just by making very quick, swift, decisive decisions, and then coming out and being the one to say it himself, and straight up call it unethical. He didn't have to do that. He could have just hid behind kind of a statement over at Tulane, but that's something that resonates with the guys out there as well. And getting out there and saying that wanting to do things the correct way, it's not just lip service when you see those types of actions be taking place, again, in someone's first 24 to 48 hours as a leader, and then have complete backing from the university in all of those decisions. And it just does truly feel like there is such more dialogue and conversation going on between admin, the athletic director, and the head coach. And you've already seen billboard ads go out for recruiting. I mean, Tulane is all in on this, and Jon Sumrall is all in on this situation. So as much as I want to talk about the bowl, and I'm going to in this next week, ultimately, that's not something that Jon Sumrall is going to have anything to do with. And without having anything other than all of these changes come out this last week, all I can really do is just continue to, I hope, instill confidence in Tulane fans that when Tulane says they got their guy, it's not just that they got the guy they wanted, it's that they got the right guy for the right time and has the right vision for this program. And I just think fans are going to see how players respond to his leadership. You've already, again, just seen players come out and really back him as a coach on social media, even guys like Jarius Monroe that aren't going to be around next year because he's going to the draft. But to have the coach already be boots on the ground down here recruiting in Louisiana, and having that background from his time in New Orleans to be able to hit the ground running right away in that aspect, Tulane's really not having to do that much catch-up work outside of who Jon Sumrall decides to hire at those positions following the conclusion of the bowl games for these guys. But all things considered, that meme of the dog sitting there with a cup of coffee in a room that's on fire saying this is fine, that's how things quickly felt when the departure of Willie Fritz happened, and then a lot of the things that have happened over the last couple of weeks. And I think until people were able to just hear Jon Sumrall in Tulane speak towards the fans, the players, just the program as a whole, you can definitely see a difference in how fans, I think, have really gotten behind the team and this program in the last week. But this is the time more than ever to really support them. And if you're considering going to the bowl game, this is a team that is in good hands and that wants to still fight out, and they know that they're not done yet with this season. It's really important to these guys to go out on a high note. And when you talk about the idea of the college football playoffs, obviously, yes, it's available next year. Let's, not all get on the train if Tulane's going to win the college football playoffs the first year they get in, but to have that idea that they can credibly go to that path, that matters when you talk about this bowl game. It's their first opportunity of beating a Power Five on the year. And yes, I know it's technically in this calendar year, but they start out the year next year with Oklahoma and Kansas State and are able to build their resume fairly quickly. And that's also something that Jon Sumrall is able to give out as a recruiting pitch, that Tulane has a legitimate non-conference schedule and then a path to the college football playoffs. I'm really excited to see, and this is kind of the year that everyone's been waiting for. And all of the conversations prior about Willie Fritz, would he stick around for the expanded college football playoffs? Like, this is the most interesting time to be a G5 head coach than it is ever before, because now your recruiting pitch isn't some fever dream of maybe we could be Cincinnati. It's not limited to the New Year's Six anymore. It's we can go to the college football playoffs. And there is a lot of guys out there that might not be getting a lot of playing time and might respond really well to a coach that just hit the ground running like Jon Sumrall has and is really committed to doing things the right way, not to mention has coached a hell of a football team at Troy over the last 2 seasons. And the actions that he's taken already as Tulane's head football coach make you want to run through a wall for this guy. And that is something that serves you well in recruiting, in the transfer portal, and as he said, recruiting the guys that are on your roster. So I will be curious to see how bowl practices shake out next week. And on my next Before the Whistle episode, I'll be able to give a little more insight on that one, but just felt that I had to really kind of talk about the things that have gone on since, what was a very positive episode for me earlier this week. And this one to me is still just as positive, but I didn't want people to think that I'm just kind of ignoring the things that are going on. I just wanted to see and give this new coaching staff an opportunity to make their own mark. And I think that the way that this situation has been handled is the beginning of one hell of a legacy for Jon Sumrall. So the first action taken by Jon Sumrall, and what was really his most important job right there and then, was cleaning up house, as he kind of said so himself in not his introductory press conference, but in the breakout room with the media afterwards, where he was asked directly about the situation involving Corey Platt by Garland Gillen with Fox 8. And his answer, I think, really just said a lot about who Jon Sumrall is as a person. And I mean, if you're reading between the lines, how I think he feels about that situation that was transpiring. And now that words have been used by the head coach, by the athletic director, in terms of Jon Sumrall going on Corey Johnson's radio show and saying that those coaches were engaging in unethical conduct and that they are no longer on the staff accordingly. The athletic director is saying that, potential tampering had been brought to their attention. It's out there with anyone with eyes to see in the age of social media that we live in. And as a wild aside to me, I just feel like there is a huge lacking of infrastructure. And when we talk about the wild west of the transfer portal and all of that, I also think about like high school recruits and what their understanding of what things mean in social media age is, and even college players at that. Social media has been kind of throw yourself into the firestorm if you work in sports media. And I guess I am saying that as someone that didn't have the traditional path to sports journalism, but Twitter was only created in 2012, and I'm sure it's something that is a lot more explicitly discussed. I'm getting away from that. All that to say, it was a kind of a harsh way to learn how to move on social media. And so I do just feel bad for the players involved in these situations, where I understand the passion and I understand the feelings of the fan base, replying to them and trying to kind of get them to stay. But I just would personally implore everyone to kind of leave the players alone. You can be angry about the situation and the way that things went down. And again, those feelings are entirely fair. But we have no idea what's going on in a player's life. We don't know everyone's home background. You just think of the amount of players that transfer to Tulane to come play back in Louisiana. There are guys that might feel that same way. And a lot of guys go to a school because of a head coach. And again, with the transfer portal rules, and now they've literally made it just completely free range out there, where they've temporarily suspended the multi-transfer waiver rule. I don't even know what that really means in this situation, but I know that the transfer portal rules, they are more lenient when you have a coaching change. Once you enter the transfer portal, to my understanding, a school no longer has to honor your scholarship. And then I believe it's kind of up to the head coach that comes in to really kind of decide what to do with those players. And Jon Sumrall made it clear that he planned on reaching out to all the players that were in the transfer portal, because I think he really understands where the players are coming from on that aspect, and just wanting to give them an opportunity to see what he's like as a head coach and then make their own informed decision based on that. And just the way that Jon Sumrall has moved this entire week, more important than really anything else, should be the takeaway for Tulane fans, that you have a coach that walked into what could have and was turning into a little bit of a firestorm and immediately extinguished it with swift, decisive action. I had, obviously, I work, close to the program. I had heard that, some of these things had gone on, but I tweeted about the coaches playing in the bowl game, just again, because there was misinformation going out there about at that time. But I'm not a breaking news gal, and it's not really something I ever really intend to do. And I just, I appreciated that news was broken, straight from Jon Sumrall on a radio show. And that, I think, also was just a good sign of everyone that's still in-house really being with the situation here and understanding what they're trying to build here, and keeping this as non-messy as possible from Tulane's perspective. Obviously, the other perspective of this is, Houston and what's been going on over there. Again, I think fans are a lot smarter than people realize. And as much as we kind of joke about social media, we also understand its importance, though. Sometimes, things can get a little conspiracy theory-ish, but, sometimes you can kind of parse things out by looking between the lines on social media. And so I understand it's been like a frustrating couple of weeks for Tulane fans, and I don't want to downplay anything that went on, because let's just be upfront. I mean, if you're a coach at Tulane and that's who's paying you, and you're coaching these guys to be in a bowl game, recruiting them to go elsewhere, to my knowledge, is not within your contract. What I really liked about what Tulane did in this scenario is, and David Harris said, where on that radio show, that he got all of the notifications, all the screaming from fans on social media that week about what's going on. And again, everyone in this situation has eyes. What I really liked about this situation was it really didn't have that much time where things were out of control, if you will. Like, the second that Tulane got a head coach in the building, those decisions were swiftly made. And then as of the next day, I don't remember the actual saying about that fox in the hen house comment that he made. All of those people were gone. So Tulane saw what was going on. They moved quickly, and then they let their new guy in charge decide how to move. That, to me, really says it all, and says a lot about what Tulane views Jon Sumrall as a coach and as the driver of this ship, and of what we have as momentum, and sustaining the same type of success and continuing on building a legacy. And I think that if you look at everything that Jon Sumrall said, the way that he wrapped things up at Troy, the way that he has approached this situation at Tulane, it's been nothing but class. And that's more important to me, again, than anything else. So there's going to be a lot of questions, though, as to, who is going to be kind of coaching what at the bowl game. You lose your defensive coordinator in Sheil Wood. The good thing is you have a linebacker coming in as your head coach. The position group coach was Sheil Wood last year. So those are two voids that need to be replaced. But I mean, if anyone's going to be up to the task in doing that, I mean, having, again, a linebacker, as a former linebacker, as your head coach, certainly positions you very well in order to do so. Josh Christian Young was one of the defensive back coaches. Going off the tea leaves of Tulane's website, previous Anchors coach Rob Green, he's now listed as a defensive backs coach alongside JJ McCleskey. And without anything being set in stone, I think it's easy to kind of see how things are really going to shape out, at least at those position groups. In terms of who's going to coach linebackers at the bowl, it is a genuine good question. And it's one that I do not have. Really fantastic news, though, is that Gerald Chapman, who was in that group of people to go to Houston, is coming back to Tulane. And I don't want to get into reasons because I don't exactly know them. And again, I just, without dismissing how people are feeling, ultimately, I'm just kind of looking to move forward with Tulane and feeling really assured that they're in really good hands here. And just seeing those things like Gerald Chapman coming back. I don't know what's going to happen for Slade Nagel. If he gets another opportunity elsewhere, then that's well deserved at this point. But when everyone else is let go and he's the one remaining, I think you can kind of infer that everything Slade Nagel has been doing has been just nothing but integrity. I saw him when I did Primetime Sports with D. Scott Alexander on TV last Tuesday, and he was there as well. And I mean, it looked like he had lived 6 lifetimes since that championship game on Saturday. And it just really struck me, what a mental load it is to step into the situation where it's not just the placeholder of a head coach, it's all of the feelings that guys have, any hurt feelings and any, feelings of betrayal or upset or just grief. He really had to step in and deal with those. And so that really says a lot about how he's been able to handle these last couple of weeks, because if Jon Sumrall has shown anything, it's that he's not afraid to make tough decisions and cut cords when need be. I mean, it was his literal second day on the job officially in New Orleans where, he made these decisions and effectively decimated half of the defensive staff for Tulane. And we all know that, again, there's more likely than not going to be some guys from Troy that get brought over here. But something that he said in a few things this week too, that stuck with me, is that when he walked into the situation at Troy, a lot of the coaches that were there, he didn't necessarily evacuate the entire coaching staff. And that's a really important thing. And it's a situation that's going to happen really anywhere, is you have to assimilate your people with the people that are there. And I mean, if nothing else, Jon Sumrall has freedom of choice at this point and some time to move, because as much as there's a question of who those coaches are going to be at those position groups, when you have a defensive minded head coach, one that, again, is able to really speak to those things, has produced NFL draft picks, that's as much of a recruiting pitch as you need. You just look at his track record as a head coach and his ability to hire a championship level staff and make hard decisions at his first day at the office in a new environment. Although there's something to be said about coming back to a place where you got someone of your start in, that Jon Sumrall did as the co-defensive coordinator back at Tulane. But, all of these things about Tulane of the past, and I think a lot of people felt like that really stopped when this new hire for Jon Sumrall was made. It's very clear to me that Tulane as a university and Tulane, the football program, while they're working in concert, they have just as much trust and confidence in Jon Sumrall in just a couple days' time. And I wasn't here when Willie Fritz got here. And for all I know, that could have been the same immediate feeling when he started in 2016 than he did by the end of his tenure. But the fact that there is this kind of just immediate buy-in and stepping back and allowing him to make those kind of decisions as the head coach of this program, I think just says a lot about where Tulane is. And you look at all of the guys that have committed to returning despite all of the turnover. And when people talk about the transfer portal situation, I think it's fair, again, to be angry about what's been going on, but you also have to recognize that all things considered, Tulane really hasn't lost the farm to the transfer portal. And as I said before, people enter the transfer portal, they can leave the transfer portal. Like I said, it's up to that university whether or not they want to honor that. But Jon Sumrall has already made that clear that all of those guys have a place here and that recruiting starts at home and that starts with your own roster. So all of these things are still, of question, but I'm really confident in the guy driving the ship here for Tulane and making those pitches. And if not, knowing that he'll be able to bring in those guys to really fill out those kind of different levels of the defense. I think that's where Tulane's taken the majority of their hits. And then just the reality of Cam Pettisflow being a grad transfer out of eligibility, Jarius Monroe declared for the draft. I believe Lance Robinson is out of eligibility as well. You do have Bailey Despaney coming back at one of those safety roles, but you lost, at least for the time being, in the transfer portal, DJ Douglas, that other starting safety. So you really have to be able to fill that out. Another person in the transfer portal is Kentrell Webb, who filled in at that safety role as well. So there are a lot of pieces that Tulane's definitely going to be able to need to plug. They've done extremely well in the transfer portal over the last couple of seasons, and I really expect them to be able to do the same. Something that stuck out in a lot of Jon Sumrall's comments again was just his adaptability and versatility when it comes to the personnel and the players that he has on the field. That he switched from, again, going from a 3-4 to a 3-3 stack to a 4-2-5 to a 4-3, just based on the players that he has in front of him. And so I'll be very curious what his eventual scheme ends up kind of looking like and how he kind of shapes out this roster with the players that are here and who he adds to that. But at the end of the day, when things go down, and I talked about how adversity, I think a lot of the time breeds greatness in a level that you just didn't really have before, where, I'm not saying, Tulane upgraded, they're going to come out of this better than ever. We have, literally no idea at this point. But when you feel like the momentum is continuing and that nothing has changed whatsoever, despite some unethical stuff going on, that is more impressive to me than anything else. And I'm at the point where I'm personally leaving into the past. I understand, again, if fans and people that follow along with Tulane still have valid anger towards that, but I'm more curious in focusing in on a leader that is willing to make those tough calls and have that authoritative look on things while still giving the opportunity to the guys that are there on the staff to put together this bowl and keep those guys around, and has said, that he would like to, in a perfect world, you'd like to be able to keep everyone you'd like to keep and bring everyone on that you'd like to be able to bring on. There's only so many roles that are going to be available, but you've also seen so many types of just position group changes, even just at Tulane. Looking at Derek Sherman, who is now moving on to Houston, he was the wide receivers coach this year. He was the running backs coach that year prior. So sometimes that's something that'll happen, where some guys might be moved around on one side of the ball or the other, kind of just depending on who's brought in. But it does genuinely just feel collaborative and like the storm has calmed. And all of the bad apples, what have you, all of that has been eliminated from what Tulane is doing from here on out. And that's what's most important to me at the end of the day. And all of that goes back to just a really short but memorable impression of Jon Sumrall, both in his comments and his actions. And when those two things line up, that's really what things get down to. So just to kind of wrap this up again, before bowl practices start up and before we have a chance to see Jon Sumrall really in action, being as impressed as I am by the way that he's done things so far, as I said at the beginning of this episode, when I had started the show, it was before the season had started. It was in the off season, and I had looked into some things like coaching philosophies and looking at those kind of coaching trees. For example, I looked at the coaching tree of Dan Campbell, Sean Payton, and Bill Parcells. I had too many Bills in my head going on there. And so I was kind of curious to see who Jon Sumrall had identified as his mentors. And those two sticking out being Neil Brown and Mark Stoops. And I watched one of the coaching clinics that Mark Stoops put on. It's on coachesinsider.com. I do actually recommend, if you have an interest in just coaching or philosophy or learning about those things, it's a really valuable resource. But his comments about building a culture and the way that he put it as climate versus culture really resonated with me. And things that I've heard Jon Sumrall say and the things that I've seen him do just in the short period of time, it really resonated with those comments. And that's how I'm just going to kind of wrap things up here, is on a positive note on Before the Whistle.